Welcome to a special edition of discussing about Labour leadership election and also the outcome of Court of Appeal. The judge have decided to prevent almost 180,000 members who recently joined not to be allowed to vote for the Labour leadership, the decision which was made by the National Executive of Labour Party. We are joined by someone who is very familiar in the community, who was the GLA member until May this year, who was got first elected in 2004 and was the only Muslim member of Greater London Authority, Murad Qureshi. Murad, welcome to Tower Hamlets.
Assalamu alaikum and namaskar. Thank you very much.
What is, in your view, the outcome of the decision by the Court of Appeal to prevent almost 180,000 members from voting in the leadership election?
I'm very sorry the Court of Appeal has taken this decision, but in some ways it's not surprising. We want the NEC to be the sovereign body. What really is wrong was the initial decision to exclude people in the first place. This should never have been conceived of, and I think it's right and proper that those who became members over the last year or so should be entitled to partake in the leadership contest. That's one of the understandings they had when they joined, and they're the people who protested and went to appeal first before it went back again. And who knows, I think it will go to Supreme Court next week, because I think there's a lot of sympathy for these new members of the Labour Party to have their right to vote for a leader. You've got to remember, we've got more than 500,000 members now. We're increasingly financially independent from vested interests, and we're the biggest party in Europe, and this is not really the right way to conduct affairs.
Obviously, when you join the Labour Party, he says that as a member you have right to participate in election, and it is a bit strange that middle of the process the National Executive decided to change the rule to prevent new members. Do you think it's done to stop Mr. Corbyn getting re-elected as a Labour leader?
I honestly don't know what the intention was, but because it happened at the same meeting when they decided that Jeremy didn't have to get the nominations, and the reading of the rules of the party was that Jeremy goes straight onto the ballot, which was at the time considered to be quite a victory. But in the meantime, this had happened once we realised all the other decisions which were made. And you're right to point out, given the undertaking we give to new members that we've had of the order of 180,000, it doesn't make any sense to have taken that right from them away, because they've not come in here thinking there's going to be a leadership contest in the rest of the year. They were none the wiser about that, quite honestly. And to take that away from them is not right or proper in any sense of the way, in sense of the word. The thing that I do look forward to is the new members of the NEC. I just hope they can do something to show sympathy to them and give them that right back. Although when they get involved in the actual management of the party is probably a moot point, but given that they're coming in, I think some acknowledgement should be made, and they went in being given a mandate on this front.
Do you think the members will be upset to some extent that their money, their subsidy is being spent in a court battle rather than being invested in a party trying to win election, get more councillors, MPs, GLA members, all of those, where they can spend on policies that are affecting the working people of this country, rather than going to court and Court of Appeal and trying to either prevent Mr. Corbyn being on the ballot paper or trying to prevent 180,000 members, which rightfully and with a good intention they joined the party.
This doesn't make the party look good at all. And you're right, we should be spending our money on better things than hiring lawyers to challenge the privileges and rights that we give to members of the party. So I would like at least hopefully them taking on board these major concerns and listening to the new NEC members, because I know many of them are making their representations on this front, and they've been given a mandate. I think they should see that, operate on that now rather than wait till when they actually come in. It's right and proper, and it's actually one of the successes of Jeremy since he's become our leader of the party, that we've become, dare I say, a mass movement of more than 500,000 members. Harold Wilson famously said in the 60s, the Labour Party is a moral crusade or it's nothing. Well, I think we've got Jeremy doing that in a modern version in the 21st century, and let's not lose sight of that.
And do you think that if you don't or win allow the members to vote, Mr. Corbyn still could win the leadership, or would that have an impact?
I mean, I've been going to our kind of CLP meetings up and down London and throughout the country. The majority of them have been significantly coming out in favour of Jeremy, and that's not surprising. He's only been there for 10 months. I'm very surprised that this has been even brought in this context. I actually think the timing of it is pretty bad form. You know, when the country's been taken over the cliff by the Tory government on Europe, and we got the pound was crashing and what have you. What happens? We've got parliamentarians putting this in.
But Labour parliamentary group have been from day one so vigorously against Mr. Corbyn, although he was democratically elected by the party members. Why couldn't they allow him to continue doing his job that he was elected to do?
I've got to confess, I'm none the wiser about what's happening in the parliamentary Labour Party, but what I would reinforce, it's taken the party a very long time to get to one member, one vote, and we should be proud of that. Many of the people who are giving Jeremy a hard time were very clear advocates of that. And I don't think we can ever now go back to an electoral college which puts disproportionate power to our parliamentarians, the trade unions and other affiliates. It's one member, one vote. We've got to trust the instincts of our members for appointing our leader, and we've got to give them a good innings. 10 months is not enough to make an impact. I've mentioned Jeremy's impact on the party itself, the membership levels, and being the biggest party in Europe. He's also made a contribution turning the party around to being an anti-austerity party and making people realise that austerity isn't a economic necessity, it's a political choice which the Tories have made, and we're going to challenge that vigorously.
And many people, including many Labour Member of Parliaments, have said Mr. Corbyn is not electable, he will not win an election, but we have seen slightly different when it comes to parliamentary by-election. The results in some areas, percentages either up or people are retaining their seat. What is your view on that, where when people say he's not electable?
Well, quite honestly, going by the polls at the moment, it's not only the silly season. All the parties have been losing their heads since the Brexit vote and us voting to go out. It's not just the Tory party, it's also UKIP and ourselves now going through this leadership battle, and there's no doubt a disunited party doesn't help, but that's not Jeremy's calling. That's other people have made that call at the worst possible time, quite honestly, in my mind. The thing you need in these turbulent times is to carry on and continue onwards. That's what we did in this country did during World War II. Why can't we do it now? And that would have been more conducive to the party's profile nationally. So I would have to discount the polls. In between, Jeremy under his leadership, we've won the by-elections, we've won all the mayoral contests in London, Bristol, and wherever you want to name. So I think that's a good indication. And the other thing is that he's still going up and down the country and getting huge responses. One of their bugbears, his opponents in the Parliamentary Labour Party, are saying, well, the North, we're not very popular in the North. Well, given the response he got in Liverpool recently, I can imagine the response he's going to get when he goes back up there for our party conference in September. It'll be a huge response. He's got Scousers for Jeremy in Liverpool, and I think that's very telling, and they shouldn't lose sight of that.
And his parliamentary secretary, private secretary, is now the prospective mayoral candidate for Liverpool.
Yes, I heard that. I mean, I'm very glad he has become that. But Jeremy will obviously have to find a replacement as soon as that contest is over and done with, and then invariably there will be a by-election there. But I think that shows that Jeremy is having an impact. There are a ton of people going to his events. And I think it's right and proper that he's continued that from last year. Because there's a discourse people want. People don't just look at the parliamentary context to engage in politics. It's about how you see politics, and it's not just about the formal processes you may have in national government in parliament, but also and local government. There are plenty of other politics which those institutions need to reflect, and this is the best way of bringing it all in.
We are sitting today in Tower Hamlets, which is the heart of London. We have Labour mayor, we have 2 Labour member of Parliament. Recently we saw in one of the constituency, Poplar and Limehouse, voted to support Mr. Corbyn. But Bethnal Green and Bow, where we have a BME member of Labour member of Parliament, actually voted for Owen Smith. Because we have large Muslim population, large BME community, but large also white working class community in Tower Hamlets. What would be your message to those Labour members in Tower Hamlets?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know what Owen Smith is offering. I actually didn't know who Owen was when his name originally came up. I actually got him mixed up with Owen Jones.
And you've been in Labour Party for a very long time.
Yeah, indeed. But the interesting thing is, there's undoubtedly the case. Jeremy has probably worked with most minority communities across the whole of London over a number of decades. And I'm grateful that I've worked with him on that front on many issues, like Iraq, against the war in Iraq, matters in Sri Lanka affecting the Tamils. He's got extensive knowledge of minority issues, and that's why we're going to have a rally for him this coming Monday at Highgate Fields from 6 o'clock. The nearest tube station is Highbury and Islington, and I think many of those communities need to come out and show support for him, because I know he's done a lot for us, not just in international affairs but also domestic affairs.
If Mr. Corbyn does not get elected again to be the leader of Labour Party, do you think there is a chance that Labour Party could split nationally?
Well, look, I was at a meeting last night at the Holborn St Pancras meeting, and my last point I made was that whoever's the victor, I hope they're magnanimous in victory, the opponents accept the results, and we get on and work together. I think we've missed the opportunity to really put the Tories on the back foot, given the state of the economy now as a result of Brettek's vote. Let's spend time working together again rather than talking about these scenarios. At the moment, it's certainly not something that Jeremy's brought up. It seems as though his opponents have been making this point time and time again. So, I mean, Labour, when it's been split before, it's cost us decades in opposition. It's not a road any of us want to go down.
You mentioned Owen Smith, and just for our viewers, we did invite Owen Smith or somebody from his team to come and address our viewers, but he hasn't responded to our email.
Sorry to hear that.
But you mentioned about his policies and you don't know what he stands for. Some of the policies that we have seen that is pretty much same as what Mr. Corbyn is offering or been campaigning for many years, and many people in the Labour rank and file asking is if Mr. Owen Smith is offering the same, if not similar policy as Mr. Corbyn, then why stand against him?
Well, you're quite right in emphasising that, and I think that's the tide that Jeremy has changed. I mean, this time last year, 3 of the 4 leadership candidates were actually still still not going along. Were going along with the Tories' austerity programmes. Jeremy made a very clear distinction there, and we will continue. And we're glad to see at least Owen has accepted that. But he has to realise, actually, he hasn't got a track record on his front, so we've just got to take his word for it. If you judge it against what he's been up to, I'm not convinced.
Well, we actually got questions from one of the viewers asking, do you think I've already asked you that question, but do you think there is any chance of Labour Party splitting and the damage that will do to the Labour Party and the community? And most importantly, I think that generally the Labour voters, there's many people who actually voted for Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, because of Mr. Corbyn. And I know that for a fact, because there's many people on the left who wouldn't probably voted for Sadiq Khan if Mr. Corbyn wasn't the leader of Labour Party. And do you think so? There could be a huge risk and damage to the party.
I'm glad you make that point, because I think Sadiq knows that, and I saw that when he got the nomination internally in the party, how the Corbyn voters came over to vote Sadiq as our male candidate in the first place. The only people talking about a split, as far as I can hear, are Jeremy's opponents. Jeremy hasn't mentioned that. They keep bringing it up. I hope they are, as if in the scenario that they lose, they accept the results and come back into the fold and make a contribution to the Labour shadow front bench. That's critical for the credibility of the party. It's not going to help them or us to be in this kind of scenario at all. We've been there before in the 80s when the SDP broke away from the Labour Party, and it was clearly one of the reasons why the Tories were able to be in power for so long during the whole of the 80s into the 90s.
And finally, the other politician especially from the Conservatives, seems to be muscling in and interfering in the Labour's internal issue, especially one of the former Minister and the Secretary of State often say things on Twitter attacking Mr. Corbyn. What is your view, or what is your message to those politicians where they seem to be more interested in what's happening in Labour Party rather than what their party is doing to the people of this country?
Yeah. Well, look, it's interesting sometimes the meddling of opponents from other political parties. The Tories may have sorted out for the time being their leadership issues, but it's undoubtedly them that's got this country over a cliff, where we're going out of Europe and also probably seeing the breakup of the United Kingdom. So let's not hear any lectures from them about how our party should be conducting our affairs in selecting a leader in our leadership contest. I'm sorry it's happened at all, but we are where we are, and let's get it over and done with. I'm not sure they can give us many pearls of wisdom at all.
One question that many of our viewers have been asking us, and many people in the community have been asking, is the current mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, seems to be keeping his distance from Mr. Corbyn. You were one of the main supporters of Sadiq when he first stood to be mayoral candidate, in fact, and I believe that Mr. Corbyn and his supporters also voted for him. What is your view on that?
Yeah. I mean, Sadiq's got a huge amount on his plate. We had 8 years of nothing much being done by Boris Johnson. He had all that to deal with, and then Brexit has become the biggest issue, superseding all the other things that he wanted to do on the housing front. It's right and proper that he just gets on with running London and getting his feet under a desk. Things like that have got to be critically done whilst we have these internal discourses. He knows very well the contribution Jeremy and his supporters made, both internally in the party elections to get him selected as the mayoral candidate, and also knocking on doors and getting him in. So it wouldn't be in his interest to antagonise the support that Jeremy has got in London.
Could he be the first Muslim leader of opposition in the future for Labour Party?
We've got a long way to go. I think Sadiq has been given a mandate, of 1.3 million Londoners voting for him and a 45% turnout to be there for certainly 2 terms and maybe a third term. I hope he knuckles down and sticks to the task on hand rather than think about the next step he could possibly take. If he does well in London, why not? But let's get that track record.
I want, and I'm sure many of our viewers would like, for you, who's been a GLA member for many years, closely associated in the inner circle of Labour Party, a message to many Labour councillors up and down the country, who actually, I think almost 500 people, or just over 500 people, signed a letter calling Mr. Corbyn to resign. But then there was a counter letter that came out also in support of Mr. Corbyn. But people who calling on their democratically elected leader to resign just based, we believe, based on hearsay.
Yeah.
What would be your message to those elected councillors, and how important is their role in the community?
Yeah, the important thing I would say to them is that don't get bullied into selecting who you're going to back. I've just heard some of this kind of stuff in the barking context, and it worries me profoundly that that's been happening. I'm not going to mention names because naturally these people don't feel comfortable with saying this publicly, but having heard it last weekend, it made me wonder how this 500 named petition was put together, and I hope and trust this isn't also happening in Tower Hamlets.
Interesting you say this, because we also have received reports, anonymous, and some people obviously for various reasons don't want to come on live and say it, but they also feel that some of the senior politicians, including possible member of parliaments, may be bullying people to support one particular candidate over another, and obviously those kind of bullying actually diminish the democratic process that people have worked so hard to establish.
Yeah, I picked up on this last weekend. As you know, I'm from the other end of town, but I do keep my ears open, and I'm actually shocked that this is happening within the party, and particularly our local government party structures. That's just not acceptable behaviour, and I trust those who are doing this will back off.
And you mentioned a rally taking place on Monday. Would Mr. Corbyn be there to speak? Will he be speaking? Because obviously the BME community actually represent quite a large Labour membership and Labour voters. Would he be there? Would he be speaking to the audience on Monday?
Yeah, Jeremy will be there. It's his home turf, Highgate Fields. The nearest tube station is Highbury and Islington. It's going to kick off at 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the evening, and you'll hear many other speakers other than Jeremy, Diane Abbott, of course, John McDonnell, no doubt, and other supporters, prominent supporters of Jeremy. I think it's important that we respond by supporting him, because he's been there in our time of need, particularly on international affairs. I gave you the example of the Tamil community and many other communities, but he's also looked out for many minority communities from his constituency in North Islington for decades, and it's time we went out there and showed him some support in a way that I don't think has been illustrated with Owen Smith's setup.
We're coming to end of the program. Many people already know what Mr. Corbyn stands for and what he has politically done in the past. If he is re-elected, do you know what sort of policies that he will still continue? Or would he, because obviously he's been enormously under pressure ever since he became the leader of Labour Party from the mainstream media and also within his party. But do you know what sort of policies that he will continue and can you give a reassurance to the working class people that they can rely on someone like Corbyn?
Jeremy has come up with a 10-point rebuild and make a new Britain programme in this contest, and the major point there is a 500 billion programme to invest in in Britain, in its infrastructure. The energy transport infrastructure needs radically changing, and that will stimulate the economy considerably. He wants to get away from just keeping the public expenditure down as much as possible, because it hasn't worked. We want to grow the economy out of this malaise that we're in presently, and it's important we also make that critical investment in the homes that people need up and down the country. He wants to see 1 million homes built over 5 years of a Labour government, half of which would be hopefully councils. Because I think it's important that councils take the lead and take on that role that they had historically and did very well over the previous decades. That's the kind of thing Jeremy's going to look out for. All the communities that we belong to, and making sure that we really do change this country in a similar way that we did in 1945 under Attlee, which transformed the nation. We can do it again. And we've got a lot more resources than they did at that time, and look what they did, create the National Health Service. So things like that are certainly there in his mind, and you can depend on him to deliver things like that.
Murad, thank you very much for joining us today and explaining what's happening within the Labour Party, and also your views on a number of other issues that are affecting the Labour members, and more importantly the working class people of this country. I hope the Labour members, especially if you are watching, this was helpful to you, and helps you to make a decision who you should be supporting in your own party for the forthcoming leadership. If anybody from Owen Smith's team is watching, or you want to come and talk about why he is standing and what he is offering, you're more than welcome to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to have him or anybody else from his team to come and give explanation as to why he is standing for the Labour leadership, when especially there was a leader democratically elected less than a year ago. However, whoever you vote for, it is a Labour Party issue, and it's your internal matter. But our job is to bring up guests, give you their views and policies why individual candidate is standing, and this is what we will continue to do leading up to the Labour leadership election.